Hunger is the #1 reason most diets fail. It wears you down, leads to binging, and eventually makes you quit. But it doesn't have to be this way, so in this video I'm going to show you 10 powerful hunger hacks to help you stay on track, feel in control, and actually reach your fat loss goals without being miserable. Okay, the first hunger hack, this is probably the most powerful one, but it's something that it's gonna sound a little crazy. Nobody else is talking about this, but I'm telling you, it can make a massive difference. And that is that you really just have to accept that hunger is part of the process. And just because you're hungry doesn't mean you have to eat. Now, don't go anywhere. Don't just click off this video. I'm going to talk about a lot of strategies you can take to actually physically feel less hungry. But this mental trick can make a huge difference, because the problem is if you feel like you're super hungry and you're trying to chase it and you're trying to do every little thing you can to try to stuff it down, what ends up happening is because you're doing this, hunger is on your mind more and more all the time, and it just drives you to feel more hungry. But when you go, you know what? I'm in a calorie deficit. Hunger is going to be part of the process, and you just accept that, suddenly you're not as hungry because it's not on your mind so much. And when you learn to sit with hunger, it actually tends to go away on its own. Which, speaking of hunger going away on its own, that brings me right to the second hack, and that's if you eat your meal but you feel like you're still really hungry afterwards and you want to keep eating, what you want to do here is stop, wait 30 minutes, and if you're still hungry after that 30 minutes, then you can eat something else. And the reason this is so powerful is because, especially when you've been doing it a long time, you've gotten a lot leaner than when you started, your body's starting to fight you more, and sometimes it's kind of like food is like the gateway drug to hunger. You might not even be that hungry when you start your meal, but once you get into it and start eating, you feel ravenously hungry. But the problem is, if you just keep eating because you feel hungry, you're just gonna keep eating and eating and eating. But if you stop after your planned meal and say, I'm gonna wait 30 minutes, most of the time that hunger goes away. But if you do still feel like you need to eat, you can, but you need to pass a test. That test, I call it, for myself, I call it the egg white test. Jordan Side calls it like the apple test. It can be any kind of healthy food that's not a lot of calories, it's nice and filling. Any food like that you like, you say, I can have more to eat, but it has to be egg whites or an apple or whatever, right? And if you find that you go, if I have to eat that, I don't really want to eat it, then it's not really truly hunger, it's cravings. And cravings and hunger aren't always the same thing. They can be the same thing, but a lot of times they're not. Which, speaking of filling foods, that brings me to the third one, high voluminous foods. A lot of nutrient dense foods. Foods that are higher in fiber, have a lot of micronutrients, they tend to help fill you up. Now, there's not just quote unquote healthy, clean foods, but there's also low calorie, high volume foods, things that are close to 0 calories, like eating pickles. You can have sugar-free Jello where the entire container is only 40 calories. There's pasta zero, there's zucchini noodles, celery and spinach. So these are all tools you can use to get more volume without a lot of calories. The other foods that help with hunger, which is the fourth hack, that is eating a high protein diet. Protein is by far and away the most filling macronutrient. So if you stick with a lot of leaner varieties of protein that are high in protein but low in both carbs and fat, they're gonna help you feel full. It's gonna help with building muscle. Protein has an extremely high thermic effect of food, so it helps with fat loss. So things like skinless chicken breasts and turkey breasts, egg whites, white fish, many seafoods like shrimp, canned tuna, lean varieties of beef, and lower non-fat dairy products, especially Greek yogurt, can be really helpful, just to name some. Now, the fifth thing is going to sound a little bizarre considering I'm just talking about how you want to eat a lot of filling foods, but also not being overly restrictive with your diet and including some of these more fun foods that aren't quite as filling, but doing so in moderation actually can help with hunger, because the problem can be if you ban all those foods that you love and you feel overly restricted, you can get into this binging mindset, and what ends up happening is you completely blow it. You feel like, well, I screwed up my diet, so I need to get in as much as possible, and now you find yourself endlessly stuffing yourself until your diet starts again tomorrow, and this hunger will just rage like crazy. But when you learn to have a little bit in moderation and fit it into your diet, it can actually help with hunger. But even if you want to make the argument that it doesn't help too much, fine. It's still going to help your diet be sustainable and make sure your results last, versus doing something just to get to the end goal and then losing it because you can't control yourself. The sixth hack is to make sure you break up your calorie deficit. If you just continue to diet all the time for weeks and months on end, your body's going to feel like there's a shortage of food around, and it's going to throw up all kinds of red flags, and it's going to send signals to your body to make you more hungry. But if you take what's called diet breaks, where you go back to maintenance for a week or two, and you do this every handful of weeks or so, it keeps your body from guarding against fat loss so much, and it helps keep your hunger under control. And if nothing else, it just kind of breaks up the monotony of dieting, so you don't feel like you're missing everything you love. The seventh hack is about meal timing. So here's the thing about meal timing. In terms of like actual fat loss, it really doesn't matter. Whether you eat 3 meals or 6 meals or 12 meals, whether you like intermittent fasting or a lot of small meals, when calories and protein are the same, it does not matter. However, sometimes we hear things like you should intermittent fast or breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And if you force yourself to eat in a time when your body isn't actually very hungry most of the time, you're working against your hunger signals. So if you aren't hungry in the morning, don't force yourself to eat because you're going to be every bit as hungry later in the day, but you've already used up a bunch of calories. But I will say this, I feel like most people do better eating bigger meals without snacking in between. But again, whatever works for you is totally fine. The eighth hack, arguably the most important, is don't create too big of a calorie deficit. The faster you try to lose weight, the more hungry you're gonna be. So don't rush the process. And not just because of hunger, but because of what it does to your hormones and your metabolism. So I find usually about a 15 to 20% calorie deficit from your maintenance calories is a pretty good spot to get things going, but not so much that it drives hunger through the roof and wears you down. The ninth hack, this is something I've really been digging into more recently, and that is there tends to be a correlation where muscle loss tends to lead to more hunger, and hunger subsides when you regain that muscle. For instance, if you look at the Minnesota starvation study, they took these men, they put them on really low calories, and they just lost a ton of weight, but they also lost muscle. So if you look at this chart, you can see the fat-free mass as well as the fat mass. Fat mass came down significantly. They also lost some fat-free mass during that time. And then when they went into overfeeding phase, as fat shot back up, they got into a phase of hyperphagia, which is basically a big fancy word for saying extreme uncontrollable hunger, something a lot of people experience post-diet, especially when you get extremely aggressive with your diet. And what you can see here is that hyperphagia did not end until the fat-free mass came back up to where it was before they started their diet. But you can also see, look where the fat mass is compared to when they started. They massively overshot their initial body fat. And even though body fat went up like crazy, hunger didn't come down until the muscle went up. So I can talk till I'm blue in the face about the importance of strength training and the muscle for metabolism and everything else, but making sure you're doing everything you can to keep your muscle in a diet, like strength training and not dieting too fast and keeping your protein high, could also help with hunger. And the 10th hack, make sure you're not sacrificing sleep. Research has shown less sleep oftentimes leads to more hunger, and let's just be real about it. Whenever you get really tired, this is when you tend to get in these phases of, well, who cares? You get down about things and you make decisions that are not in your best interest, so don't skip out on your sleep. Now, earlier I talked about how helpful protein was and gave a brief rundown of some higher protein foods, but if you want a bigger list covering 11 of the best protein sources, then check out this video next. Otherwise, I think you'll like this video instead. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll see you in one of those other videos.